Hello, and welcome to Not Too Shabby, the Chimney Corners Camp podcast, featuring camp directors Shannon Monty and Abbot Pittman. In each episode of this podcast, Shannon and Abbot will share crazy camp stories, let you in on some camp secrets, tips, and tricks, talk about life at Chimney, and even pull the curtain back on how camp runs from behind the scenes. From staffing to activity planning to the friendships we make along the way, join us twice a month for your camp fix.
All right. Hi, Shannon.
Hi, Abby. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really good. I'm really excited about this episode because I think it's gonna shed some light on some chimney secrets.
Chimney secrets. Yeah.
Do you know what we're gonna talk about?
Is this the one where we're gonna talk about chimney history a little
Yes, chistery.
bit? Chistery.
Did you know that our staff and a lot of the kids call our Instagram the Chinstagram?
No.
Yeah.
I don't.
They call it the Chinsta.
How am I so out of the loop?
Well,
That's interesting.
I don't think they say that to you. They don't go, "Hey, Shannon, did you post in the Chinsta?" No.
That's an aside.
Please.
That is really funny is that people always have thought that I was just like, I'm somehow omniscient and know every single thing that's ever happened at camp.
Aren't you?
And yet often I'm the last person to know because people don't tell me because they're afraid somebody's going to get in trouble or whatever. Or they just assume I already know. I've had through the years, people like will tell me something that happened at camp and I'll be like, what? And they're like, oh, everybody knew. But I think they forget that they all talk with each other
Oh my gosh.
and don't necessarily share it with me. But what's really interesting is that it seems silly because it's a ways off, but Chimney is getting up there in years. And
Almost your age.
Yeah. Oh, that's so funny. That's so funny.
1931.
Yes, so we were established in 1931, which means it's out there.
It's 6 years away.
6 years away.
6 years from now, it'll be 100 years since Chimney opened.
Yeah, which another kind of interesting thing is it'll probably coincide right around the same time that I would be, retiring.
Oh, yeah, we're not going to talk about that because it's never going to happen.
That's right, because that'll never happen.
It's like when you're talking about your pets and you're going, but they'll never die.
Right.
Because they won't and you'll never retire.
Right. That's true. Okay, so moving along.
That's good. So since you have been here for, a couple of centuries at this camp, and now you're the longest running camp director at Chimney Corners in its 90-something-year-old history.
That is actually not true, but
Wait, what?
I
thought you beat someone.
I've surpassed all but one family, the Smiths.
The Smiths.
And that's another fun fact. So Chimney has only had 5 directors in its history, which is sort of amazing when you think about it.
Yeah.
Because I forget how many Beckett's had quite a few more.
They're a little bit older.
They're also older.
Only like 20-something years older.
Yeah. But so the Gibsons founded Chimney. They created it.
I've heard of them.
Which is interesting because Henry Gibson was really the second director of Camp Becket, but was probably the most influential director at Camp Becket.
Who was the first? Do you know?
I forget.
We'll have to call in Dan Berg.
Yeah, or we'll have to dub in me having the answer. So I sound smart, but he is the founder of Chimney Corners.
Okay. Wait, okay, so I think you're going to have to start from the beginning, as history often is told. Would you start from the beginning, or would you give us a brief history as told by Shannon Monty of Chimney Corners Camp?
Okay. I will try to make it
do the best you can. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask, like sometimes, I think I kept this in an episode previous, sometimes you forget to leave out crucial details because you're in your own mind.
Out crucial information.
Sorry. Okay. Well, you don't have to call me out, but thank you.
Sorry.
Sometimes you forget to input crucial information because it's already in your head. It's like
yes.
And so I'm gonna ask maybe some questions that people might be like, "Wait, I missed that."
Right, because I was just thinking it and I didn't say it out loud.
Yes.
Okay. So going back to Henry Gibson worked at Becket for many years. He met his wife Ina Gibson.
That's what the IGL is named after.
Yes.
Ina Gibson Lodge.
They were married. They had 2 daughters. And when they retired, the Camp Becket community said, hey, in thanks for all that you've done for Camp Becket, we'd like to build you a house down the road on this piece of property. And there had been this kind of old dilapidated house. It was really had fallen apart, but there was this big chimney in the middle of the wreckage, and they had always thought it was kind of a cool spot. So they decided to save the chimney, rebuild it, and then build a house around it for the Gibsons. And they did that, and that's what is now the Ina Gibson Lodge.
Oh, so the house was where the Ina Gibson Lodge is.
Yes, and it got added on to it. Eventually became the Chimney Corners Dining Hall at one point. And they just kept adding on to the building.
Wow.
And then they also had what was the nest, which was a house that was in front of the barn.
Yeah, you can kind of still see the steps.
Yes. Yeah. So that was, and that's where the Smiths lived, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then the barn was always like a gathering area and stuff like that. Anyway, so the Gibsons retired. They moved, they were and I don't know if they were only there in the summer or if that was sort of their permanent year-round house. But then Camp Becket approached them and asked them if they would consider opening a girls' camp.
And do we know why the decision to open a girls' camp kind of came to be?
Well, I think, we don't specifically, but always the way I've heard it is that, I think people just wish that they had a similar place to send their daughters.
Right.
Now, obviously, back then, the Y had nothing to do with girls. It was truly
for young Christian men.
Young Christian men. Yes. And the Girl Scouts had been doing some camping and things like that, but camp was not as common a thing for girls, and definitely not in the Y. Basically, in order to serve girls, it had to be a private camp. So the Gibsons opened a camp with a small group of girls that would stay. They had to wash up in wash basins. They get water out of the well. It was very, very primitive. But when you talk to women from that era, the memories are just so amazing. And there was actually a chapel that was right next to where the barn is, a little closer to the road, where they would do their Sunday services
cool.
And sing hymns. And Henry Gibson would do his sermons. And, it was definitely way more religious back in the day. And so what's really cool about it is even though it was a private camp, it had all the foundation of the YMCA, which, I, having grown up in Y camps, Henry Gibson was hugely influential in the entire YMCA camping movement. He wrote books about it and you can kind of see the ripple of his influence, throughout. Okay. So anyway, so that's kind of a cool thing in terms of, some of the ideals and things that they established, have carried forward.
Okay.
So they ran Chimney Corners for about 10 years. And then Henry Gibson was older, and he was at the end of his life and was quite ill. And there's no way that Ina could run it by herself. They had actually lost a daughter who, it was they'd been through some stuff. She had passed away in childbirth, and their other daughter, Dorothy, was a kind of this amazing woman who served in World War II as, I think, a WAVE, which was the women's arm of the Navy.
Oh,
and
cool.
Yeah, I mean, she was a really amazing adventurer kind of person who I actually met early in my career. She would come to events.
You met Dorothy?
I met, Dorothy, their daughter.
Wow.
Ina lived up until, I think Ina didn't pass away until in the 90s.
Wow.
She lived she was much, much younger than Henry. So anyway, so they sold the camp to the Smiths in 1941, I believe. 1940, their first summer was 41.
Okay.
And what was so cool about the Smiths were they were a young couple. they had been they knew a lot about camping. They were, obviously the Gibsons were an older couple. Things were a little bit more kind of the way the stories are told, that the Smiths were, really kind of understood the concepts of camping, and they did things like Christmas in July activities and
wait, I'm gonna interrupt you. Just were the Smiths at Becket at this time?
No, the Smiths were just, that's a good question. They must have, I wonder if the boys had gone to Becket. I don't know how the Smiths came to know the Gibsons.
Okay.
Or if they had advertised or that word was just out there. I mean, Henry Gibson had been very involved with like ACA and all these other camping associations. So it's possible that the Smiths knew them through that.
Gotcha.
But anyway, they purchased the camp. And so they ran Chimney Corners from 1941 until 1971. So they were the longest standing directors. And some of this, so the Smiths actually had 3 sons. And they did things like the Smiths took out a huge loan and built Chimney's Lake.
Yeah, Smith Pond.
It has Smith, which it was originally called Beaver Pond. But we changed the name in honor of the Smiths because this thing that they did, I mean, it was a huge risk. I mean, they took out a big loan. They cleared the land. They built a dam. What's really funny is I think this was like in the 60s, and they didn't tell anybody. They didn't ask anybody. They just basically dammed up this little stream river.
Yeah.
And made the lake. And they said somebody came hiking up to find out what had happened to all the water.
Oh my
basically.
Gosh. Oh my gosh.
Which, I mean, these are all things that you could not do today.
No,
there's
permits
no
now.
way that anybody would allow you to again, I don't know a lot about it, but had they not done that, we would have, up until that point, the Chimney campers walked to Center Pond.
That's right.
Down through past Brewster House. There's a road that goes back to Center Pond. So it was quite a hike to go swimming. So that made a big difference.
And what year did they make the pond?
I want to say, I don't know. It was early 60s.
Okay.
Though.
Okay. Well, I always have it in my head that pond is very recent, but it's really not.
Oh, another interesting thing is they used to do water skiing on that pond.
With like an electric boat?
Or like
a motorboat?
Probably just a motorboat.
That's what I meant when I said electric. I don't know why I said electric
boat.
Well,
I can see why you'd say electric, just because we don't, neither of the lakes here or ponds do we allow motorized vehicles.
Right.
But that's really our choice.
Yeah.
But at the time, I think, they did the water skiing. I just can't imagine.
It's not quite.
It doesn't
big
feel
enough.
like it's big enough. Like it must have been very tight circles, and plus it's not that deep. I'd be a little nervous to drive a motorboat on that.
It's pretty deep.
Yeah. The other cool thing that the Smiths put in, which I think I've heard was never that popular, they had a 3-hole golf course that was down where our dining hall is now.
A 3-hole golf course?
A 3-hole golf course, yeah. They also had, horses go way back at Chimney. I think they go back to very early, maybe the whole time. But there was a horse barn that was more down by where the dining hall is now.
Okay.
And it wasn't till later that it got moved up to where it is now.
Okay. So let me go back to the Smiths, 30 years. So you need to beat 30 years. Is that right? You said 1941 to 1971.
51, 61, 71.
71.
Yeah, I think it's 31 years somehow.
Okay, so you have to
when you
beat
count
31.
the summers.
The summers. You have to count the summers. And Shannon, you're at 28 years? You started in 1998?
7. My first summer was 97.
Okay, so this will be your...
We have to do math.
It's your 28th summer.
Should I get the calculator out?
It's your 28th summer. We've been saying 28 for the last 3 years, though.
I know. Well, and I think we have the whole dilemma of, do we count the COVID summer?
I think you should.
Yeah.
Because you were here. Are you doing the math now? Mm-hmm. She's got her phone out and she's trying to figure out how to do this math.
Minus 1997. Yeah. See, it's 28. But is that so there's also the number of years versus the number of summers, which is always, I think I always have more summers than I have years. So I think next summer is my 29th summer, probably.
The 2025?
I think so.
This coming summer would be your,
I think it'll be my 29th summer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So you need to beat 31.
Right.
So you're not allowed to retire
for
at least 3 more years.
Exactly. Well, I feel like it almost lines up. Like I will for sure have beat the Smiths.
Excellent.
So
1971.
Mm-hmm. So Howard and Evelyn Smith were the couple, and it was really a partnership. Evelyn knew a lot about camping and really was the structure and the discipline and the business side of the camp. I don't think she gets enough credit for how much of that she did. And Howard was like the big personality and the draw and the person that was kind of up in front and kind of the heart of camp. And she was, I would say he was the heart of camp. She was the backbone of camp.
Gotcha. I like it. Okay.
Evelyn actually had got cancer and 10 years before they sold the camp.
Wow.
And was battling cancer. And I think she was still working really hard. I think the family was working really hard to keep the business going. But it got harder and harder for Evelyn. And I think one of the sad things that happened was, I think because she was struggling with an illness, I think her patience kind of faltered.
Yeah.
And so she ended up being a little snappish and that got hard on everybody. And I think they were really trying to protect people's positive memories and all that. And then Bill Smith was killed in a car accident.
Oh, geez.
And the other 2 brothers who were young and really couldn't take over the business, and Howard and Evelyn really needed to retire. And so they approached the YMCA at the time. And at that time, Don Schellenberger was the director of Camp Becket, and Jean Schellenberger, who was his partner, his wife, had a master's degree in education, really a phenomenal mind in terms of group work, and really understood why camping at a deep level had been, again, a true partner to Don in the whole development of camp curriculum. So they made the decision to sell Chimney Corners to the Y, which was painful. I mean, it was, and what happened was Camp Becket, came in and very much asserted their culture. Jean worked really hard to try to bridge the transition, but she would tell me a story. Jean Schellenberger was a wonderful mentor to me, and I feel so lucky that I got to know her in my career. We had a couple opportunities. At one time, I drove her back to Cape Cod, and we had these amazing conversations. But one thing I always appreciated was she would tell me stories about the challenges she had. She wasn't always like, oh, everything I did was great and wonderful. She would tell me stories about things that were difficult. And I think it was her way of saying, I know this job can be hard for you sometimes. Here's how it was hard for me too.
Yeah.
But she talks about the very first day of camp, she went to greet the Chimney campers, and they took one look at her and just burst into tears. And she said, "You don't even know me yet,"
No.
So it was a really, really hard transition because, a beloved camp, it had this real family feel, and it was under obviously duress. The other, I think, challenge for Jean was that the Smiths lived right next door.
Oh,
so they didn't go anywhere. So Howard would drive his tractor up to camp, and the kids would come running out. So obviously they had their feelings at Becket about how things were at Chimney, and they were trying to say, hey, here's the better way to do things. And I think it wasn't always well received. So I think it was painful. And I do think in some ways it set up a bit of a dynamic between Camp Becket and Chimney Corners that you see a little bit of ripple effect.
Interesting.
Of, just the push-pull of, can we have separate identities but be the same? Kind of like sibling rivalry. There's that competition, which I always am like, why do we compete? You know, we're completely different camps.
Yeah.
I mean, we have so much of these similar great things, but you know, I can't recruit Camp Becket campers and they can't recruit Chimney campers. So
that's true.
You know, might as well just work together. So that's something I think we always, we always have to work on. But Jean was an amazing leader. I think one of the things, so she ran Chimney Corners from 1972 up until 1989 when she and Don retired.
Wow.
So think about this. Another really interesting thing. Don was the Camp Becket director at the time because there only was Camp Becket.
Right.
They lived in Framingham,
they didn't live on site.
Massachusetts during this year. And there was a camp office in Framingham, and they only moved out here in the summer.
Huh. Okay.
So, so that was another kind of interesting. These camps were really summer only. There was a couple caretakers that would be out here, whereas the Smiths had lived here year round.
Right. Okay.
But they were involved, I think Howard Smith, did some things with the Becket School. He was a little bit more involved with community. Anyway, so then the Chimney Corners became part of the YMCA, and it became the Becket Chimney Corners YMCA. Mm-hmm. And for a while, Don carried on as the Camp Becket director, and Jean was the Chimney director. Mm-hmm. What's interesting is Jean still, there's always been a little bit of I think in the early days, Jean was also still expected to be the hostess for Camp Becket things, even though she was running Chimney Corners, and there was a little bit of those kind of odd roles and things like that. That Jean had to navigate. Jean was a big part of, I think, really making Chimney a much more inclusive. I think in her tenure, the community became much more diverse. She had a real commitment to inclusion.
Okay, cool.
Which I think is the reason that Chimney Corners has made the amount of progress that it has, in that realm, was because it was part of the culture from very early on. And I know she was very committed to that. Inclusion in all its forms, so as was Susan France, who came after Jean. So I think there was a huge legacy with that.
That's where I start to get fuzzy. So I know about the Smiths, and I know about the Schellenbergers.
Yep.
And then there's the two between you and them that I'm always kind of
There's not two, there's one.
You said you were the fifth director.
Yeah, wait. So there's the Gibsons, the Smiths,
I forgot
the Schellenbergers, and, not Jean Schellenberger. I always say the Schellenbergers, but it's Jean Schellenberger. Yeah. So she was the first singular director as well.
Okay.
If you think about it.
All right, so there's one between you and Jean.
So Susan France grew up at Chimney as a camper, and as her original last name is Irons, so she is related to
Susan Irons,
Dr. Irons, and so she's the daughter of Rusty Irons, who was the original camp doctor. She is the sibling of David Irons, who was also our camp doctor for many, many years. So she had grown up at camp. She was a counselor, was a unit director.
Wow.
She also has a background with education and all of that. And she very much was, I think Jean right away saw her potential as a leader. She really deeply understood the camp culture. And Susan was really amazing in that she worked really hard to get equity between Camp Becket and Chimney. For example, construction cabin was only for boys. And then Susan was the one who said, this program really needs to be, for both camps. She so much carried on the strong group work, and that Jean, the close contact with families. Chimney was incredibly successful, always full. Another cool initiative that Susan did was she created a partnership with Easter Seals. So, worked with different families with kids with, some different physical challenges and things like that. She did create a lot of these different partnerships and really continued the work and built on the work of inclusion and finding ways to just serve as many kids as possible. I think that was, a big part of her legacy. And her first summer was 1990.
Okay.
And then she was the director up until 1996. So for a long time it was Don and Jean, just Camp Becket and Chimney Corners. Yeah. But I think as the organization grew and they started to get into some, like having a little bit more like outdoor center stuff and doing more year-round things. And, there was at that point an international travel program that ISEP had started.
Right.
And Don was really running that, but I think it started to become like so many big programs that they needed to get more staff. And it became evident that I think Don just got to the point where they really needed to have an overarching leader, or a CEO essentially, or an executive director. And so they hired Lloyd Griffith to be the Camp Becket director. And I need to check the timing of that because he then went on to run Seagull in.
Oh yeah, I know Seagull. Yeah,
and his
in
wife Seal. Yeah. So again, a wonderful wide partnership. Lloyd and Seal Griffith, who worked here, and then so there's a really strong connection between Seagull Seafarer and Becket Chimney Corners because of the shared history, and it's always been just, I think, just a wonderful connection of leadership and history again. And I know Lloyd and Seal were beloved at both here at Becket Chimney Corners and also at Seagull Seafarer. And I think they are really some amazing giants of camping in terms of you see the ripple effects of their positive leadership all over the place. So
that's so cool.
Yeah,
it's funny because I was in a Y program called it's called Y Guides now.
Oh, right.
I won't talk about what it was prior.
Yeah.
But we would go do weekends there at Seagull and Seafarer because, as you know, I grew up in North Carolina, so I'm familiar with those two camps. And in fact, I remember in my interview with you when you were talking about these camps, I remember being like, "Oh, kind of like Seagull Seafarer," and you were like, "Yeah." Just like that.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's really cool that we have that connection. I don't think I knew that connection existed.
Yeah. And that program, I used to, it's a parent-child program. Yeah. And when I was at Camp Jewel, I love the program. It was it's
a great program. Yeah.
Yeah. And so
it's something to talk about in another podcast because it is a great program. It's gone through some changes in the last couple of years to make it a little bit more appropriate and not appropriative.
Right. Well, and what we're talking about is it had what is it? You say appropriated, First Nation or Native American culture, which I think we've all learned is inappropriate, and then the Y adjusted to that, and like, it's a learning curve, and
of course, yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, that's kind of part of, again, we have to be honest about our history. And I think that's been a positive learning change, but it, like all change, it was difficult at times. So
sidebar.
Yeah.
This is going to be part 1 of our kind of like surface level chimney history. And then the next show will be part 2. Shannon, are you ready?
I'm always ready for part 2. So stay tuned for part 2.
Okay. Thank you, Shannon.
Thanks,
okay.
Abby.
Bye.
Bye.
What's up?
Hey, Dan. How's it going?
Hey, Abbot. It's going really well. Thanks for giving us a call.
Sure. So I was hoping you could answer a question for me.
Absolutely. I would love to answer a question.
Okay. The question is, who was the first director at Camp Becket?
Well, contrary to popular belief, it is not Henry Gibson, the founder of both Becket and Chimney. George Hannum was the first Camp Becket director in 1903 for just the first summer.
Wow. Okay, perfect, Dan. Thanks. That's all I needed to know. I appreciate your time.
Great. Well, thanks, Abby, for the call. I'm going back to the beach.
Okay, have fun. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to Not Too Shabby. Keep an eye out for part 2 of Chimney History. It should be up in early February, but I got to admit that I I haven't edited it yet. So when I get to it, I will post it for y'all. I do want to give a big shout out to Hannah B, who is one of our fans on Spotify and comments on all of our episodes, which we love. So Hannah B, thank you for being an amazing listener. Okay, y'all, we'll see you in the next one. Bye.